Let's jump into it. Are you ready for another fun, joy-filled morning in Ecclesiastes? Yes. The nice part about Ecclesiastes is it seems it only really gets darkest right before it stays still kind of dark, right? And it may get a little dark. It may get a little dark this morning, but I assure you that this is taking us somewhere, and it is teaching us something important. So grab a Bible, something to take notes on. The title this morning is Relationships and Reality. The main idea for the morning is this, that relationships are a gift that we enjoy when giving. Relationships are a beautiful gift from God for this life, but we get the most out of them, we find the most joy in them when we stop trying to take what we need, and instead we focus on embracing, giving ourselves to other people. Let's read it. We're going to read all chapter 4. It starts like this. Again I saw all the oppressions that are done under the sun, and behold, the tears of the oppressed, and they had no one to comfort them. On the side of their oppressors there was power, and there was no one to comfort them. And I thought the dead who are already dead more fortunate than the living who are still alive. But better than both is he who has not yet been and has not seen the evil deeds that are done under the sun. And then I saw that all toil and all skill in work come from a man's envy of his neighbor. This also is vanity and a striving after wind. The fool folds his hands and eats his own flesh. Better is a handful of quietness than 2 hands full of toil and striving after wind. Again, I saw vanity under the sun, one person who has no other, either son or brother, yet there is no end to all his toil, and his eyes are never satisfied with riches, so that he never asks, for whom am I toiling and depriving myself of pleasure? This also is vanity and an unhappy business. 2 are better than 1 because they have a good reward for their toil. For if they fall, one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him who is alone when he falls and has not another to lift him up. Again, if 2 lie together, they keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? And though a man might prevail against one who is alone, 2 will withstand him. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. Better was a poor and wise youth than an old and foolish king who no longer knew how to take advice. For he went from prison to the throne. Though in his own kingdom he had been born poor, I saw all the living who moved about under the sun, along with that youth who was to stand in the king's place. There was no end of all the people, all of whom he led. Yet those who come later will not rejoice in him. Surely this also is vanity and a striving after wind. So, you might have saw it in there, but our first point, our first section is this. Verses 1 through 3, humans suck. Some of you seem to have also noticed this. You're laughing. You've also noticed that humans suck. If you haven't, the teacher in Ecclesiastes says, let's look a little closer at what humans are like. In this first section, the teacher draws our attention to the worst parts of how humans relate to one another. When we look around our world, we see some of the most atrocious abuses of human rights by people who have the most control over people with no power. They had no one to comfort them, it says, and it's repeated. It's emphasizing the isolation the oppressed feel and the lack of having anywhere to turn in what they're experiencing. It is as if to say there is no one to comfort them, and even if someone did have the courage, there was no comfort to be had. We're talking about humanity's absolute worst types of relationships, where one side takes and takes and takes anything they want from the other side. I think of the leader of La Luz del Mundo, who's in prison now. He would tell his victims of abuse that what he did to them was actually a blessing for them, and that they shouldn't tell their families because their families might not have enough faith to understand, and it might cause them to leave the church and then end up in hell, convinced there was like nowhere for them to turn, not even to a God, for comfort. The other day, Dave mentioned to me his friend in Africa, a former child soldier. Even after getting out, he faced just vast amounts of obstacles and challenges to re-entering society, all because adults who should have been there to nurture and to guide him instead sent him to do these terrible, terrible acts for their own purposes. And when you start to add up things like that and think about them too much, the child abuse, the elder abuse, slavery, human trafficking, caste systems, genocides, the list goes on and on and on, you understand the sentiment being expressed here. That I wish I never knew any of the crazy things that we do to each other. I would like to congratulate all the people who have moved on from this life and don't have to see any of it anymore. And if only we all could have been so lucky to have not ever seen any of it at all. I listen to true crime podcasts from time to time. Have you noticed people tend to say that like it's a personality trait? It doesn't make you interesting. They're like the most popular kind of podcast because humans suck. You never run out of material. But I used to listen to them in bed from time to time, and one night I fell asleep listening to one, and I woke up in the middle of the night. It just kept playing them. I woke up in the middle of the night listening to the description of a grisly murder. And I just thought this cannot be good for my brain. Outside of just kind of morbid curiosity, we don't really want the worst of what humans are capable of living inside of our brains in any meaningful way. But here again is the kind of perspective, kind of reality check nature of what Ecclesiastes is doing for us. Because ignorance is not bliss. It's not. At best, ignorance is a very temporary bliss until the realities of life under the sun come crashing in on us and we're devastated because we thought there was nothing like this that could ever happen. But we need to know, it's important that we know what humanity is really like and really capable of. The reason for that is because this happens on smaller scales and in more subtle ways all of the time. From a boss in a workplace who mistreats employees, knowing they would have to risk losing income or careers that they've been working for decades to say anything about what's happening, to just a mean girl at school who seems to hold your whole social life in her hands. It's important to understand the realities of what humanity is capable of, because you need to know what you are capable of. If you think you would never use whatever power you find yourself with to unfairly benefit yourself over other people, you are lying to yourself. Every single one of us is capable of things like that. And I guarantee in some small way, every single one of us has done that. And if you naively go through your life thinking you couldn't or you wouldn't do that, you're probably the most likely person to do it again without even thinking about it. Once we've kind of allowed ourselves to understand the potential realities of human relationships, we're now faced with the problem of how we even go about working and living with other people at all. Our teacher in the next section will show us two approaches to life that it seems common that people take, and then he's going to offer us a third and a better way. The first approach to life that people seem to take is to just get on top and to just stay on top. We'll see this in section 2, a better approach to relationships, verses 4 through 7. Verse 4, it says, or shows us that the first approach is to let jealousy drive us to just get on top and stay on top all the time. If there's oppressed and oppressors, I just want to be more on the better side that benefits me. James saw it in his day when he wrote, "You desire, but you do not have, so you murder. You covet and cannot obtain, so you quarrel and fight." It could be understood here in this sentence that envy of our neighbors is both the motivation of our work, but it could also be understood that it is the result of our work, and probably both ideas are at play here. We skillfully strive so that we can be better than the people around us, but with our achievement and our gain, we come across brand new peers to envy and start all over again. That is one of the biggest flaws to this approach to life. There will always be someone better than you at something. The smartest person in the world is jealous of the person with better social skills, and that person is jealous of the person who has more money or toys or whatever it may be. The professional athlete wants to be a comedian. The comedian wants to be a rock star. The rock star wants to be a political leader. But the actual bigger kind of flaw, the bigger problem with this approach is what it seems to do is to train us to see people through the lens of our own desires. People become less people to us and more like Pinterest dream boards of the lives we want to live. Surrounding ourselves with people we feel have made it maybe will make us feel like we made it. We might be, I think, especially susceptible to this living in kind of a nice, cool, small town like we do. You probably have noticed this. People get kind of weird in Canby every once in a while. People get weird about the length of time they've lived here, or about how prominent of a family they can associate themselves with, or which team or club or special interest group they can get their family to be a part of. Like filling your social group with the right people and making sure all the wrong people are out of it is going to make you the person that you want to be. And this town is awesome. I love Canby. I've been here 5 years now, exactly last Sunday. I plan to live here for a long time, but Canby's not that great that that somehow like gatekeeping your status here is going to achieve some sort of significance in your life that you have been looking for. And certainly that's not something that just happens in small towns. It's a variety of contexts. You've probably noticed when you've come across someone who's just scratching and clawing to make a connection that they can leverage into a better connection, that they can leverage into a better connection. You've felt it at times when you've been talking to someone and they clearly don't have time for you because they've discerned that you don't offer them any step up to whatever the next ill-defined social level they're looking for is. Or maybe, and probably likely, we haven't noticed when that's happening in ourselves and we're doing that to other people. The most insidious thing about this kind of envy and this approach to relationships is we can convince ourselves that we are giving to those relationships, that we are loving in those relationships. David Gibson describes it like this. He says, "If I envy you through loving you, because I love you only to get something from you, then not only am I engaged in oppressing you, I have a cancer that eats at my heart and can destroy me even as I destroy you. This is because I have dressed up my selfishness in generosity and deceived both of us in the process." As we move to verse 5, we see a little bit opposite but equally selfish approach to human relationships. At the beginning of this little bit of wordplay from verses 5 to 7, there's actually 3 different Hebrew words for hand that are used here. And it helps to notice them, even though I'll probably get made fun of for saying them, because sometimes it's just a cheap way to make sure everyone thinks you're smart, is to bring up stuff like this. But I'm not smart. Bible scholars are smarter than me, and you all can find the same information I found. So here we go. Here's the 3. Here's what it says. It says, the fool folds his yod. Yod is like the part of your body from the elbow to your fingertips. This whole thing is called hand here. It's a synonym for power, like when you say we were delivered from the hand of our enemies, or people talk about the hand of God in the Bible being upon them. Back in verse 1, if you remember there, what it actually says there is that in the yod of the oppressors, there was power. Here, what it's telling us, it says the fool, this lazy fool, in response to the ugliness of human relationships, what he does is he folds his yod. He gives up on relationships. Whatever abilities he had, whatever things he could offer to other people, he just folds them back in on himself. He gives nothing, he receives nothing, and so he wastes away with himself as his only resource. And when you phrase it that way, it does sound pretty foolish, obviously. But I think we can all admit we're tempted to do this from time to time. Relationships are a lot of work. They are not easy. Dealing with people is not easy. I would rather often not deal with it at all. Who never forgets to show up for me is like my cell phone. Never forgets to show up for me. I can always open it up, and there's always a YouTube feed there ready for me. You know who never talks about me behind my back is my TV. And my TV doesn't judge me when I sit on the couch with Oreo crumbs all over my stomach. It doesn't disappoint me unless I accidentally put a Mariners game on. And this is the problem. There is things that are so much easier than dealing with other people. When you think people just aren't worth it, what you tend to do is to just waste yourself on yourself. And you eventually, in your laziness, in relationships, just waste away altogether. And verse 6 here has two more words for hand. It says, better is one cough. A cough is the palm of your hand, the hollow of your hand. It's sometimes used to refer to a bowl. It's your hand like this. It says, better is one hand open and peaceful and quiet, and that is better than two Hofen. The Hofen is the hollow of your hand once it's been closed into a fist. These two big fists trying to grasp and hold on to what is ultimately human relationships under the sun. Something that no matter how hard you grasp it, it's just like trying to catch the wind. A better approach, the best approach to go into our relationships is to go in with openness and with peace. How do we find peace in relationships? It's right here, to approach them with a proper perspective. Crossing our arms and refusing them, we waste away. Trying to scramble and claw to grip onto every last benefit I can grab from other people, it leaves me anxious and confused, and I'm left with two fists that are just full of air. When I share myself, when I'm not trying to grip or control my relationships, I can give and I can receive what is a gift from the hand of God. Sometimes I'll get hurt. True? But that is okay, because we also find so much joy. It's Tennyson's classic line, "'Tis better to have loved and lost than to have never loved at all." And there's tons of sentiments like that in our culture. Sometimes I'll give more than I receive, and that's also okay. Sometimes I'm going to receive more than I give, but you'll enjoy the gift of relationships when you stop focusing on taking and you stop focusing on keeping everything for yourself, and instead you open your hand without expectation and peacefully and generously open yourself to others. In verse 7, if you need help understanding this, just consider someone who works and works and works and has no one to share anything he gains with. What's even the point of all of that? He can never make enough. He's never satisfied with what he accumulates, but he never stops to ask who or what is he even accumulating all this stuff for? And I wonder here when I read this one, I wonder, is this a person who was always alone? Or is this a person whose never-ending toil is what caused him to be alone? Some of us would have to acknowledge that we aren't alone in life, but at times the amount we work is leaving us functionally alone. There are lazy fools, and there's the hardest working fools in the world, but both are fools and both are alone. That's an unhappy business, to work for vanity, to succeed, to accumulate, but to have never stopped and just opened your hand to the people you love. But here's the best part. If we get this right, if we find this balance, the best part about getting this balance is correct, is that when you're open to relationships in this way, you find something pretty cool. And that's in our next section, verses 9 through 12. Humans don't suck. They don't suck all of the time, right? Relationships are awesome. Keep in mind that hard and really bad things will happen too. But when you're living life out under the sun, it is so much better to do it with people by your side. When you toil with your hand open to others, you accomplish more, it shows us. When the most unexpected things, when accidents, when mishaps come along, we help each other in them. When we require comfort or provision, we provide for each other. When our safety or security is threatened, we stand up for each other and we guard each other. These are literal and figurative advantages to being in relationship with other people. When we let God bring the gift of people into our life, these are some of the things that we find. And you'll see this little kind of number game being played here. It says 2 better than 1, 2 better than 1, 2 better than 1, 1, 2, 3, right? And 4 is better than 3, and 5 is better than 4, and 10 is better than 5. This isn't about a married couple or any other specific pair of people, yet it is about that. It is about marriages and any other relational or social unit you find yourself in. The same guy I quoted earlier, he emphasizes the importance of moving from me to we. When you move from me to we, you can start asking not just what do I need, but what does my group need? I was studying this, and I was thinking about it, and I was thinking hard about it, and my brain was fried, and I was going to go home for the night, and Emily had a meeting that evening, so it would be just my girls and I for dinner. And I knew if I stayed home, I would want to just zone out. I would be like, yeah, go ahead. You guys want to watch a movie? I'm going to sit by myself. And I'd probably just do that. And what I felt like I needed was to do nothing at all. But when I thought about what do we need as father and daughters, was what we needed was real connection. And so we grabbed our cooler. We grabbed our picnic blanket. We got takeout from Backstop. We sat in Waite Park, and we just had a time to sit together, and we played a stupid game, just talking about old memories of past vacations and laughing and having fun together. And that was what we needed, right? That type of connection is something that I enjoyed so much more than whatever I would have done if I just sat by myself. The me scenario maybe was staring at a screen for a couple hours. The we scenario created so much joy because I stopped thinking about what I was going to need the most. Or maybe it's asking, what do my friends or my neighbors or my community need? Emily and I were reading this book with a cheesy name called The Simplest Way to Change the World. But we're thinking about our home and the way we go about hospitality. And that's what the book is about simply. It's about opening your home and your life to other people. And what I think I need in my home, and probably a lot of you are the same way, is I think I need an oasis. I think I need a shelter from all of the weird things that happen when I'm around people. But what if moving from me to we might lead me to ask who could benefit from experiencing the hospitality of loving and committed Christians? It doesn't even have to be that big of a deal. I make that mistake all the time. It's just about opening your life, your everyday life, to people. My house is right across the street. Maybe someone wants to come over for lunch today. Tell me if you do. We'll eat leftovers probably, and you can help me pack for Peru. It's everyday things, everyday life. But when you think about it, think about how many chairs needed to be pulled up to tables to enjoy a simple meal or drink a cup of coffee or to come and sit in someone's living room for the gospel to make it from Jesus' time and Jesus' place all the way to the point where you got to receive it. Right? Would we be willing to open ourselves and our lives and our homes to be a part of a purpose like that? A great illustration, I think, for the strength in numbers is how Jesus taught us to deal with sin in Matthew 18. Confront a person in sin with your one relationship. If that doesn't work, then come with 2 or 3. If that doesn't work, bring the strength of the whole church to stand together against the power of sin. In the saddest cases, that person would need to be removed from fellowship to declare that you are not a part of the we here, We need to take care of something before you are. Now, obviously, that isn't the default answer to every sin, and you would never rush into something like that. Otherwise, I would have already been removed from fellowship for unrepentantly letting my wife mow the lawn, which I have been confronted by individuals and groups already multiple times. But if that kind of idea seems extreme, the important thing to remember is that the goal is to restore the person to healthy relationships. But while doing that, also preserve and protect the church from the chaos and the destruction of the way that we sin against each other. This is why, and only this is why, some of the healthiest and most life-giving relationships can be found in the church. Because we can guard each other against human envy and manipulation. And when we do that well, we can all give ourselves more fully to the group because we know the glory is for Jesus and not just for the greediest of individuals among us who capitalize on it. Those relationships, those are a beautiful gift from God. And when you experience that, like many of you do, because I know you're experiencing it here the same way that I am, when you experience that, you know the truth that the most joy is found when you're giving to those relationships. Of course, that's only true when people are committed members of a church, which is why we talk about that often. Leaders are accountable to the congregation. The congregation is accountable to each other. After all, a person could never be removed or restored to fellowship if there never was any official fellowship to begin with. But back to life under the sun. When you experience the power of relationship and the strength of not being alone, but being supported by a group, the temptation might be to start thinking, this is what it's about. Relationships is finally what it's about. I finally found the thing that brings meaning to my life. Brings meaning to all the meaningless confusion we experience with our time on earth. And if you're starting to think that, that would be a mistake. They make life better, but they will not ever, ever, ever fix your life. Our last section of Scripture, we see that relationships are most meaningful when we are not the center of them. Our final story about life and relationships, it paints the picture clearly that relationships make your life better, but cannot solve your deepest problems in life. Age would have always been associated with wisdom here, but this king, for some reason, age hasn't brought him wisdom. Why? Because he no longer takes advice. He's no longer in relationship with people who can help him to lead. He's been at it so long, he's lost touch with the people he was supposed to lead. The result is that a new leader, a young man who understands the people and cares for them, leads this kingdom to prominence in his place. If you've been reading digital liturgies with us, our fall resource, this week you would have read the chapter on disembodied wisdom. One danger of our lives being increasingly lived out online is we have all these connections, yet we're more alone and more depressed as a society than we ever have been. And part of that is because we're force-fed whatever information that keeps our attention the longest. That's how it's designed to work. And the thing that keeps our attention the longest is the stuff we like and the stuff that we already believed. So people on either side of issues, they have this huge pile of evidence, and they think anyone who disagrees with me either has to be a complete idiot or just totally evil. And because of that, we start to think that we're taking advice, but we're really just listening to the incessant echo of the things that we already think. It's never been easier to completely forget how and what it looks like to take advice. Because we look at our disembodied online lives and we can count up all our connections. We can see all the people we follow and they all follow us back. So I must be doing something right. But if that's the case, let's look at our hero, the hero of our story, whose wisdom, his relational connections, he achieves incredible success. What better could you hope for than to get from relationships and connections all the wealth and popularity and all the power in the world? But what does it say he gets for it? Nothing. The world passes him by, the people move on to the next leader. The kingdom he built for himself is vanity, it's meaningless, it's smoke. It slips through his fingers. Only a few of you know who the last worship leader of this church was. Some of you know the guy before that because he came back as a volunteer. I don't even know who the guy before that was, and it won't be long after I'm gone that no one will know who I was. And worship leaders are cool. We play guitars and stuff. And people still forget us. That's why we learn to play guitar. So the same is obviously true for you, whatever position in life you occupy. And here's the thing. This is good. This is good news. This is a good thing because it frees us from trying to get from relationships what relationships can never give us. Your relationships are a gift that are most enjoyed by giving. And the only lasting meaning that you find in these relationships is when you remove yourself from the center of them. They enhance your life, but there is one relationship that saves your life. Jesus gave himself, modeled this for us, gave himself so fully for us. He died for the very sins that we use to destroy each other, and in his resurrection restored us to God and to each other forever. When we remove ourselves from the center and put that at the center, we find something that is meaningful, that is lasting, that is significant. Enjoy the gift of relationship, giving yourself generously because you can believe that his legacy in your life lasts for eternity. Let's pray together. God, we thank you for our time in your word. And God, even as it starts dark and even as it is a reality check, we are not naive that the world is like this sometimes. And God, help us to be more and more aware, to search ourselves often, to see what it is in us that is more like the negative description of relationships here than like the positive. God, help us to be open to each other. Help us to find peace. Help us to look to you, to serve and to love, and to be far more excited about your story and what you are doing than about what we get to create out of our lives. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.